Hello, this is Joseph Roy, Superintendent of Schools for the Bethlehem Area School District, and this is the presentation presented to the board on January 11, 2016, in which we lay out the preliminary budget. The preliminary budget is the beginning of the budget cycle for school districts starting in January and concluding in June. Under Act 1 of 2016, we are required to present a budget and ask for the board's approval of a preliminary budget. This year we'll be asking the board to approve the preliminary budget as required 90 days prior to the primary election, and we will ask the board to approve it and certify that the administration can file for certain exceptions under Act 1. Our preliminary budget strategy at this point is to maximize the options available to the district in finding a balanced budget between January and June. This requires flexibility on the revenue side as well as flexibility on the expenditure side. There are some common threads throughout this budget process that drive our work in planning the budget. We want to maintain our Bethlehem Area School District assets, a wide range of forward-looking curricular offerings, well-maintained facilities, professional development, up-to-date technology. We've been very successful in controlling growth of local expenditures over the last few years, but we face the challenges of inadequate state funding, a charter school funding plan at the state level that's broken, and a pension system that also places an unfair burden on school districts. Our 2016-17 budget goals are always driven by our Roadmap 3.0 to educational excellence. The roadmap is focused on providing a well-rounded education, educating the whole child, we like to say, and that includes the 4 core components of successful schools: core learning, math, reading, science, social studies, etc. Stretch learning, stretching the unique talents of students. Student engagement, connecting kids to their learning. We know that students who are engaged, the higher the level of engagement, the higher the level of academic success. And personal skill development, because as a public school, a big part of our mission is developing and growing good citizens. So personal skill development is important as well. We wrap that framework with the Danielson Framework for Teaching, because instructional quality is critical to student success. And then our outer band on our roadmap is excellence through equity. We must focus on providing equitable opportunities for success to all of our students, because our students come from such a wide, varied range of backgrounds and bring various skills to school with them. Preliminary budget, the beginning, is a challenge. When we look ahead at our projected revenues and our projected expenditures for the fiscal year starting July 1, 2016, at this early date, we anticipate a $15 million deficit. Now by June, that deficit has to be zero through some combination of increased revenues and reduced expenditures. You'll notice on this slide that the PSERS, PSERS is the state pension system for education, has a significant increase again this year of over $5 million. Our charter school expenses, because charter schools are publicly funded, although they're privately run under state law, also, we expect a significant $5 million increase. And then everything else in the budget: salaries, benefits, including health care, educational programs, transportation, facilities, everything else we do in the district has an increase at this early point in the process of $4.7 million, with those totals matched against our revenues resulting in a deficit. In the current budget, we expect little from the state, because the state at this point in time has not passed a state budget for the current fiscal year, let alone given us an idea of what we might anticipate from the state for the 16-17 school year. It creates extreme difficulty for school districts when the state simply does not uphold its side of the bargain in funding public education. So as you'll see on this slide titled New Money, the net we expect is only $400,000, which is next to nothing in a budget as large as ours. So the state funding impact on this slide, we show that the current year, 14-15, we received $27.9 million from the state in what's called basic education funding, 14-15. We know that that's what we received because that budget year is over. For the current budget year, 15-16, although we're halfway through the budget year, we still do not know how much we will receive from the state because the state has failed to complete a state budget which should have been completed by July 1. So we guesstimated for the current budget that we would see a state increase of $1.8 million. And for 16-17, we are guessing that perhaps we'll see an $800,000 increase for a total increase over the 2 years from the state of 2.7. This reflects the budget framework that was agreed to by the governor, the House Republican leadership, the Senate Republican leadership prior to December, but then that deal fell apart when the House Republican leadership was unable to secure a majority vote in the House to support that framework. Instead, the Senate passed the bill that the House had passed with significantly less money for education, so rather than 2.7 for this district, we would only receive $878,000. Now again, the budget's not finished, so we're still guessing what the final numbers from the state might be. This is a critical slide, the next slide, on proposed education policy reforms, because it emphasizes that our budget situation is the reflection of political choices that have been made mostly at the state level regarding financing schools, regarding charter schools. This slide shows that the BASD budget would be $12 million to the positive if the state would simply carry out a number of modest reforms. One, pass the budget framework that had been previously agreed to. That's $2.7 million. Two, for the next fiscal year, have a modest increase to schools of 3%. 3, amend the charter school special education formula. There's widespread consensus between Republicans and Democrats across the state that the current charter school formula vastly overpays charter schools for special education costs. If charters were only paid for their actual costs of special ed, Bethlehem Area School District would save over $1 million. Cyber charter schools are overpaid as well, and there's again widespread agreement on that across the state, but that hasn't been fixed. If it was fixed, it'd be $260,000. If the state reinstated the charter school tuition reimbursement, we would benefit to the tune of $5 million a year. When charter schools were originally approved back in 1997, the funding system set up for charter schools recognized that when school districts have to start paying tuition to charter schools, overhead expenses may continue. And the amount that is sent to charter schools in tuition to follow a student does not match any reduction in cost at the district level. So the state used to reimburse state school districts, understanding that there are overhead costs, and that reimbursement was eliminated in the first year of Governor Corbett's administration. So the funding formula was unfairly altered to the great detriment of school districts, costing Bethlehem Area School District roughly $5 million a year. And then if the state would do something to manage the dramatic increases in the pension costs, which school districts have no control over because that's set at the state level, we would estimate a $2 million savings. So all of these proposed reforms have been discussed at the state level. There's fairly widespread agreement on them, but they have not been passed. The legislature has failed to act. And as a result, that's $12 million a year from sources at the state level that could be benefiting the district and the district's taxpayers that we're not receiving. As a result, when we look at the revenue summary, we're looking at only a revenue increase of 2.5% total, that's with the hopes of a state increase. When we look at our revenues by source at this pie chart, you can see that the vast majority of our revenue, roughly 70%, comes from local taxes. We need the state to pick up a larger share. The local real estate versus instructional subsidy slide is meant to show that if you look at the orange line, state funding from what we would call in general the instructional subsidy has been pretty close to flat, as districts have been hit by the state-mandated increase in expenses of PSERS, the pension fund, and charter schools. So we've had this whopping increase in the state mandates through charters and pensions. at the same time that state instructional subsidy has remained flat, putting a much larger burden on the local property taxpayer. Again, this is a problem that can be solved at the state level if we chose to do so. So when we look at our overall budget expenditure summary, our starting point, this is not where we'll end up in June, but our starting point shows that the BASD portion of the budget will expand at this point 5.47% expenditure increase. The pension increase is 21% and the charter school increase is 24% for a total expenditure increase of 8.7%. Now we'll trim that back. That will be reduced as we refine and make reductions over the course of the spring. But you'll note that the largest part of our expenditure increases are driven by the state-mandated pensions and the state-mandated charter schools. Again, look at our expenditures by category. You'll see instruction is 63% of the budget. That's our core function, teaching and learning. We have support services and then our debt service. In this 16-17 budget, we're focused on ongoing investments in educational programming that supports the learning of our students. This slide demonstrates a number of those. I'm not going to run through all of them, but you'll notice the Project Lead the Way, literacy materials, technology programs, and after-school programs, summer programs to support our struggling students. So in this budget, we have a total of $7 million budgeted for to support those investments, knowing that we'll probably have to make some reductions as we go through the process. But these are core, important areas that we need to continue to invest in. This equality and equity slide is meant to demonstrate the importance of understanding that our job is to provide equitable opportunities to all students. That means fairness. Equity equals fairness. Equality equals sameness. So equality means everybody gets the same thing regardless of their need, as this slide demonstrates. If we have the tall students, the short child, and the medium child all get $1 to look over the fence, the shortest child still can't see over the fence. That's equal. They all got $1. If we, however, distribute the boxes based on the needs of the students, the tall student can still see without a box. The medium student needed $1 and the short student needed $2. Needed more opportunities, more supports to be able to achieve the goal and to find success, if we put it in the terms of student success. So we need to look at, as we design our budget and our priorities, what do we need to do to provide equitable learning opportunities for all students? I've mentioned several times the impact of pensions. This slide simply shows that the PSERS funding rate increases dramatically. This is mandated by the state. You can see that it's grown from as low as single digits as recently as 2010-11 to an incredible 30% of payroll for the current year. This is a backbreaker for districts. If we look at our expenditures by program area, we say, okay, if we view it as what do we get for $1, you'll see that 61 cents of every dollar goes to instructional programs, 7% for maintenance, and so forth, down to 0.1% for debt service, for example. 10 cents, I should say, for debt service. So that gives you an idea if you look at it in terms of $1, how do we spend our money? 82 cents of every dollar goes towards direct student programming. When we look at it from our expenditures from a non-discretionary side, that is, how much flexibility do we have in any given year to make reductions? Contracts dictate salary and benefits. Debt service is locked in. Special education services are mandated. Transportation, although we're not required to provide transportation, if we choose to do so, and we do, transportation is quite expensive. It'd be difficult in a large district to say we're going to not eliminate transportation altogether. That's why we include it as a non-discretionary. You'll see that the non-discretionary expenditures take up a significant chunk of the budget, 93%. The salaries as percentage of budget slide shows that when we add up all total salaries and benefits, 64% of our total expenditures goes to that, salaries and benefits. We're a people-driven industry. Education is a people-driven industry, and people are our greatest expense. Another huge cost driver for us is charter school enrollment. As the charter school have become more prevalent in our local districts, neighboring districts have approved more charter schools. We've seen more students attend charter schools, and the tuition that we must pay to charter schools is increased every year. So we've seen a dramatic escalation in charter school costs. These are direct BASD dollars that are sent to charter schools. These are public dollars, our tax dollars, that are sent to privately run charter schools, but publicly funded charter schools. It's a major issue, and it's a major drain on our district's resources. You'll see on the charter school impact slide that for the students that attend charter schools, it is almost 10% of our budget for charter school tuition. It is 17.6% of our tax burden. So nearly 18% of our tax burden goes to charter schools, just passes through the district to largely unseen, unaccountable charter schools. Again, this slide on charter school subsidy references the elimination of the charter school subsidy from the state, and you'll see that the blue line went to 0 in the 11-12 school year. Had the state kept in place the original charter school subsidy to help districts defray the cost of the state charter school mandate, our district would have benefited to the tune of over $20 million over the last few years, approximately $5 million alone for the coming year. So when we return to the preliminary budget, our expenditures projected and our revenues projected at this early date in the process, we're facing a gap of $15.2 million. Those budget cost drivers, again, to summarize: pensions, charter schools, salaries, healthcare. You'll notice that our general operations are actually at a negative with reductions we've made internally, but we do result in an overall deficit because of the lack of revenue growth and the huge increases in PSERS and charters. If we look at those primary cost drivers and put the pensions, the PSERS, and the charters together, you'll see that from the 7-8 school year, those costs have gone from $10.9 million to over $56 million per year for our district. These are, again, state-mandated expenses that are imposed by the choices that state legislators have made that have had negative impacts on school districts. School districts in Pennsylvania are limited to the ability to raise taxes by what's called the Act 1 index. This year for the Bethlehem Area School District, that index, that limit is 2.9%, as shown on this graph. However, districts can apply for exceptions for extraordinary expenses, understanding that because in certain circumstances that index may not allow for growth of expenses that districts have little control over. So for the Bethlehem Area School District, that would be special education costs. And again, the PSERS, the retirement contributions, would allow us to raise taxes above the 2.9% if needed. But that is the process that we'll work through the spring. The district has done a wonderful job over the past few years of rebuilding the fund balance for our credit rating, for our ability to weather crises like a lack of a state budget. It's critical that the district have a fund balance, a savings account. You can see in this slide where in the red that the district was in the negative in the fund balance. We had 0 in a district this size. We're in difficult straits a number of years ago. We've successfully rebuilt that, and we maintain that in the fund balance in the 8 to 9% range, so that we are protecting our credit rating and protecting ourselves against large unexpected expenses. When we look at how our district compares to surrounding districts on tax rates, on millage rates, we're about right in the district of Northampton County districts with our millage rate. When we look across the Lehigh Valley on a equalized millage basis, when we calculate out to equalized mills across the Lehigh Valley, this slide demonstrates that the Bethlehem Area School District is actually quite close to the bottom. We're fourth from the bottom of all the school districts in the Lehigh Valley, below the Lehigh Valley millage rate, and just below the state average as well. So our district over the years has been cautious in raising the millage rate, although we've had to provide an education to our students, especially in the face of the lack of appropriate state funding in context in the Lehigh Valley, and we are at the lower end of school tax rates. Other comparative data, just for context, our district is the 6th largest in the state. We're considered one of the more wealthy districts. Out of 500 districts, we're ranked by the state as 136th most wealthy. Yet we are conservative in our spending 5% less than the average school district per student in the Lehigh Valley and 9% less than the state average. So the next steps for our district, the board considers the preliminary budget and we'll ask for the board's approval on January 25th in accordance with the timeline set to us by the state. The district will then apply for Act 1 exceptions, and the district administration will continue to work to reduce the budget gap. Our timeline for the spring, again, adopting the budget, preliminary budget, January 25th, is kind of the starting gun for the budget process. We expect to hear the governor's budget for 16-17 on or about February 2nd. Again, we don't have a budget completed for the current year. Makes it very difficult to try to figure out what type of revenue support we might receive from the state for the 16-17 year. We'll do budget workshops at the end of March and at the end of April. We'll keep the board updated at finance committee meetings. By state mandated timelines, we'll ask the board to complete a tentative final budget adoption May 9th, 30 days before final budget adoption tentatively set for June 13th. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have from now until June to complete that work. We'll continue to monitor revenues as we go through this school year. We'll continue to monitor our current expenses, and we'll make reductions in expenditures, and we'll monitor revenues as we go through this budget process so that by April, end of April, beginning of May, we have a balanced budget for the Bethlehem Area School District. Thank you.